Survivor 46 is here, and so is On Fire, the only official Survivor podcast, and we have a twist this season. The winner of Survivor 45, Dee Valladares, will be joining us every week.
We're going behind the scenes of the biggest moments, the how and the why things happen, and the strategy and analysis you can only get from someone like me, a Survivor winner.
Listen to On Fire, the official Survivor podcast, wherever you get your podcast.
I've got kids, and that means it's always about them. But I need support too. That's where Ollie comes in. With their delightful, hardworking gummies, my partner and I can actually get a good night's sleep, so we'll both stand a chance of managing our stress responses. Even when the kids are doing parkour in the living room, discover Ollie vitamins and supplements. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Welcome back to another episode of the Husband Coach's Corner. Today, we are talking about a routine check-in that we need to have with our wives in order to build our marriage. It's hard for me to understand why so many people think that they could just go through marriage without checking to see where they are with their wife. And that's why today's episode is so important. So stay tuned. And let's go. The concept of checking in with your wife is not new. This isn't something that I just came up with. I've been talking about this over the past couple years that I've been doing this podcast. However, there's something about it that triggered today to really bring forth the importance of having the check-in. So I'm not going to go too deep into the check-in. I will give a few ways that you can introduce the check-in with your wife, if that's something that's a little bit contentious or controversial in your home, in your marriage. I'll help out with that, and I'll give just a few items that you can discuss during your check-in. But the goal here is for you to learn your marriage, your relationship, and adapt the principle of the check-in to meet what you need in your marriage. Don't worry about what I do with my wife. You make the check-in what you need it to be to build your marriage, to make sure that you and your wife are going where you guys had planned to go. What is the check-in to begin with? The check-in itself is you and your wife sitting down and really going over two main questions, right? What's going good in our marriage, however you want to word that, and what isn't going good in our marriage, and how do I improve this, or how can we improve this? That's really all you need for the check-in. Now, you can add more things in if necessary. You can start talking about seasons of life and things of that sort. Again, the principle and idea of the check-in is really what I want you guys to walk away with from this episode. Not so much what you need to talk about, with the exception of those two questions. What's going good in our marriage and what can be better? All right. Once you ask those two questions, you really want to make sure that you aren't defensive. The check-ins need to be a place where you and your wife can be honest with one another. Like, look, guys, if you can't be real with your wife, and if your wife can't be real with you, you guys are going to have a really, really hard marriage. All right. Our wives are supposed to see the things in us that will refine us and make us better and stronger. But more importantly, the wife that we married, the woman that we said I do to, is telling us, hey, this is what I need your help with. She's giving you the answers. She's given us the answers to the test. So being defensive and saying, well, I already do that, is probably not the best way of going after it. And this is the reason why I'm suggesting and really being critical about the importance of having the check-in. In my own marriage, I put the check-ins to the wayside. And I'm the one who runs the check-ins, right? My wife doesn't come and find me and say, hey, Chris, what is it that is going good in our marriage? What isn't going good? Stuff like that. I have to go get my wife and say, all right, hey, we're about to do a check-in, and I just need to know what's going on in our marriage. How can we improve it, and what's going good? I'm the one who runs that. Like I've told you, the reason why I haven't been doing the podcast, I have been slipping on my husband game. But I'm getting back on track. I made an episode about commitments, and one of those commitments is getting back on track with doing the things that I know build our marriage. That is one of the commitments that I make every single week. Because of that, I know that I need to follow up with my wife at the current moment every single week. Every single week, I sit down with my wife for about 10, 15 minutes, and then I am asking these questions. And there's some aspect of restarting the check-in with my wife that has built our relationship and our intimacy. I know things that are going on in our marriage that I observed, but I wasn't really a part of the solution. But when I heard my wife's heart in this moment, I said, okay, I know that I need to step in and be the husband she needs me to be in this season of life that she's going through. Guys, you got to have these check-ins. It is so important. Like, you're not going to know. It's almost like a cheat code. If you do it the right way, it's like a cheat code. If you play video games, you know what I'm talking about. But if not, if you sit down with your wife and you ask her, like, hey, what is going good with our marriage? She's probably going to tell you. The thing that she's really going to tell you is the things that aren't going good, because naturally we can see those things in our lives. When something doesn't go the way that we expect it to, we can see those things way faster than we can see the things that are going good. All right. Sometimes I got to help coach my wife through it. Like, hey, look, these things are going good, and that's okay. Now, let me backtrack for a second. I want to be clear. I am not saying that anyone should go back and try to coach their wife to get them to say good things if there aren't really that many good things. All right. Make sure that your wife is seeing the good, at least from your perspective, because your wife should be asking you these questions as well. Right. My wife, she knows that when we do a check-in, I'm going to tell her how I feel about some things. And I do it in a loving way, right? I love my wife. I'm not going to disrespect her or anything like that. This is why it's so significant to have these check-ins, because you can get that much closer with your wife when you talk to her about the things that are going on. And if you do it regularly, man, like I said, this is like a cheat code, all right? Hidden secret. Husbands, if you do this, intimacy levels that get unlocked when you do this right, all right? And just so I'm not being subjective when I say when you do this right, when you hear what your wife says and she responds well to what you say, and then you take action based off of what she said, that is the right way. That is the objectively correct way of having these check-ins. All right. These check-ins keep you on track. All right. It's like if you are on an airplane and you shoot an azimuth to the next airport, if you get off by a couple degrees over a length of time, you end up in the complete wrong place. The only way that you stay on track, because the wind is blowing that aircraft, for those of you who don't understand aviation and how planes work, the reason the pilot is there is because they're keeping the plane on course based off of what they planned as their flight plan. And as weather patterns change, guess what? They got to change the flight plan. We have to do the same thing in our marriage. When situations come up and seasons of life come up, we have to change our trajectory, our flight plan, our plan of action to make sure that we're getting to the end result that we said that we were setting out to get to as a couple. The more frequently you check in, the more likely you're going to hit that target. That's the reason why this is so important. So if you're brand new to the podcast, here's how I would recommend that you introduce these check-ins with your wife in a more subtle, but still being direct kind of way. So you say, hey, honey, let's sit down and just talk about a few things in our relationship. So that way we can grow stronger together. Your wife is usually going to respond quite well to that. Now, depending on where you are in your relationship and what circumstances have happened, maybe you're listening to this and you guys are on the brink of divorce. So getting to a point where you can sit down and talk about some things, maybe you need to have that realistic conversation with your intent behind the marriage. Now, I am a huge advocate for mending relationships and not settling in divorce. I despise divorce. That's actually the reason why I created this entire podcast, is because I want to combat divorce across the globe. That's just the point. I want to help husbands build their relationships and be the leader in the household that their wives and their children need them to be. Now, I completely understand that's not always the likelihood of a marriage, but I want to help as many husbands overcome that divorce hurdle or, walk off the ledge of divorce as best as I can. So if you're in that situation, then you need to sit down and really build out a game plan. And these check-ins need to just be a part of the game plan. All right. If you are facing divorce, send me an email. Say, hey, Chris, I really need help coming up with a game plan so that way I can save my marriage. I will get back to you as fast as I can. And hopefully we can sit down and have that discussion and figure out how you can overcome your divorce. If you just had an argument, maybe wait until the dust has settled in that argument. All right. But definitely figure out when you can sit down with your wife and say, hey, I just want to talk over a few things so we can grow stronger together and build our relationship and marriage. All right. That's usually always going to be met well by your wife. All right. My wife, she received that well when I introduced it to her. And, the first iteration of our check-in, I would love to say went perfect. It didn't. I got defensive. It turned into this bitter conversation. But over the years of practicing this with my wife and going through it, we've learned how to actually have those honest conversations with one another so I can be open with my wife about things, even if it's something that truly does upset me to the point that I don't really want to talk to her, but I still talk to her about it anyway. That's the benefit of having these, but I'm not going to continue to harp on the benefit of this. There's so many benefits. I promise you, there are so many benefits. Once you have this incorporated in your relationship, one of the best recommendations that I can give you is to set it up weekly for the next 6 months. The reason why you want to do that is you gain momentum. After that 6-month period, you could do a reassessment and say, okay, do we need to do this weekly still? And maybe you do, maybe you don't. But then once you get to that 6-month period and you say, okay, we got some momentum going, we're building our relationship, we're doing well, then you can suggest, okay, hey, let's do this once a month. Now, that's the furthest, or that is the frequency that I would only suggest if you have really built that momentum. And I wouldn't go any longer once a month. If you give yourself 12 opportunities every year to check in to see how your marriage is doing, like a genuine conversation about that, your marriage is going to develop. When I say a genuine conversation, I mean a conversation where you and your wife can be honest with each other and that you're going to do something about the things that were heard, both of you, right? This isn't just a you thing. With us being the husbands and the leaders in the household, we have to make sure that we take lead and we start doing things before our wives in many cases, all right? Because once our wives feel love, they're going to give us respect. And once we feel respect, we're going to continue giving out love, all right? So we have to start where we can and control the things that we can. We can't control our wives. We can't change our wives, but we can love our wives, and then they will make a choice, Lord willing, to respect us. And then that's when our relationships really start to thrive and grow and build. I've also mentioned in the past, and I'll tell you again right now, just to make it clear, there is the anniversary check-in, all right? So the anniversary check-in should be more of a planning session, all right? Now, you don't have to do this on your anniversary. In fact, I would recommend not doing it on your anniversary. I would say do it before your anniversary, but within that month. So think of it like this. If your anniversary, like for me, is June 10th, I would probably do the check-in, like our annual anniversary check-in, somewhere towards the middle to end of May, all right? And that would count as my May check-in. So then when I go into June, I don't have to worry about having a check-in near our anniversary. Here's the reason why. For our anniversary, I want that to be a celebration of our relationship. I don't want an argument lingering around that celebration because it doesn't feel like a celebration at that point. So my recommendation to everyone is to do it somewhere before your anniversary. So that way, if there's something you can build on, you can maybe incorporate that into your anniversary celebration. But if not, at least you're not going to hinder the celebration by having a check-in on your anniversary. Because remember, these check-ins, they can be really emotional. They could be really hard. They could be very challenging. They could be difficult, regardless of how good you are at them. Like my wife and I are pretty good, and we still have some rough check-ins, all right? This is not one of those things where you can predict that it's just going to be great every time. No, that is not the way it goes, because real things get said in these check-ins. And sometimes those things will hurt your feelings in a way that make you want to retaliate. And my prayer and hope to each of you and my guidance to everyone, wives that are listening to this included, have the mindset of retaliation when you hear something you don't like during a check-in. Instead, ask yourself, how does this truly apply in our relationship? And what is it that I don't understand about what my wife or what my husband is telling me? Okay? Because when you approach something from the aspect of, okay, I don't fully understand that, can you unpack that a little bit more? And then start asking questions that helps your wife or your husband, depending on if you're a wife listening to this, helping your husband unpack it. And if you're a husband listening to this, helping your wife unpack the thing that you don't understand and that you don't like. And this is going to take time, and this takes a lot of practice because you can instantly get upset. But what you really want to do is say, okay, wait a minute, I don't understand that. Help me understand this a little bit better, because I want to meet you where I'm apparently not meeting, and I want to make sure that I'm doing this the way will be received well by you. So, and then take it into baby pieces, however you have to. And husbands, I'm really looking at you to lead that conversation. It's our responsibility to be leaders, and I get it. It's not always easy to lead, especially if you have a very intimidating and strong wife. We all want strong wives. Our culture has really driven our women to take over as some dominant roles in the household. And that's a thing that I have been combating and helping husbands work through. And, there's a challenge with that. All right. I fully acknowledge that. So you have to figure out how to work with your wife. And that's why I said at the beginning of this episode, you have to adapt the idea of the check-in to meet your relationship's needs. Whatever your relationship needs, you need to make sure that what I'm saying here, you adapt it as well as you possibly can for your marriage. So with that, I'm going to leave it there. Now, if you are over on Spotify, there are questions and there's a poll. And I've been doing that recently on many of my podcasts. And this is really just a way for me to fill out the audience and understand what's going on and get feedback from you so I can make the content a little bit better and more suited towards the people who listen. So if you're a regular listener, regardless of what platform you're on, go find this podcast on Spotify if you're not on Spotify already, and go ahead and answer the question or the poll, whichever one is available. Sometimes it's both. So that way I get some feedback and insight from you. And it helps you see what's also going on in the community, what's going on with other husbands across the globe that are challenged in many of these areas. I'm also still working on the Patreon site. And inside of the Patreon site, for those of you who don't know, I used to give out, and I still do, an older version of a product that I call the Wife Journal. You can get that by joining the newsletter. It's an automated thing. You sign up for the newsletter, you get an email or a link to download the Wife Journal completely for free. But the updated version of the Wife Journal is going to be inside of Patreon. And for those of you who join the Patreon, you're going to be able to get updated versions of the Wife Journal, updated pages and drills and stuff like that inside of the Patreon platform, as well as some bonus content I won't really speak of here on the podcast, but just know that there is going to be bonus content for the members who join the Patreon, just as a way of me giving back and saying thank you for supporting me on my mission of helping husbands all across the globe build an enriched marriage and finding ways to love their wife every day. So with that, I do want to say, go ahead and find a way to love your wife every day. Peace.